On the misty, freezing morning of April 9, 1940, the geopolitical fate of Northern Europe and the survival of the Norwegian constitutional monarchy hung on the traverse mechanisms of three Krupp artillery pieces manufactured in the late 19th century. In the annals of naval warfare, few engagements demonstrate the principle of asymmetric warfare as starkly or with as much strategic consequence as the Battle of Drobak Sound. It is a narrative that defies the conventional logic of military modernization. A state-of-the-art heavy cruiser, the pride of a resurgent totalitarian superpower, was intercepted and destroyed by a skeleton crew of pensioners, raw recruits, and reservists manning a fortress deemed obsolete by its own government. This action, though only one small part of the larger German invasion of Norway, ultimately prevented the immediate seizure of the Norwegian king, cabinet, and parliament, thereby ensuring the continued legitimacy of the Norwegian state in exile. By the spring of 1940, the Scandinavian peninsula had become a focal point of intense strategic interest for both the Allies and the Axis. The primary motive was Swedish iron ore, a resource essential for German armaments production, much of which flowed through the Norwegian port of Narvik during winter months. Without these shipments, German industry would have faced critical shortages. Grand Admiral Erich Raeder had repeatedly warned that an Allied seizure of the Norwegian coast would be disastrous for Germany, bottling up the Kriegsmarine and choking the flow of ore. At the same time, the Allies were contemplating their own intervention in Norway, and on April 8th began mining Norwegian coastal waters. Against this backdrop, Hitler launched Operation Weserübung, a lightning strike intended to occupy both Denmark and Norway in a single day. The German plan for Norway hinged on speed and surprise. The capture of Oslo was the political centerpiece of the operation, and the heavy cruiser Blücher, only recently completed, was placed at the head of the naval assault group tasked with penetrating the Oslofjord under cover of darkness. According to German assumptions, the mere appearance of powerful warships would induce the Norwegians to hesitate long enough for the cruisers to reach Oslo harbor. On board Blücher were not only sailors and marines but also Gestapo personnel, administrative officers, and bureaucrats meant to take control of the Norwegian government immediately upon landing. This assumption that intimidation and confusion would prevent resistance proved to be the fatal flaw of the operation. The Blücher herself represented the pinnacle of modern Kriegsmarine design. Formally listed as a 10,000-ton treaty cruiser, she in fact displaced over 18,000 tons when fully loaded. Her armament included 8 20.3-centimeter guns and an array of secondary weapons, while her propulsion system gave her speeds of over 30 knots. Yet she also carried significant liabilities. Her decks were crowded with fuel drums, aircraft munitions, and equipment for the occupation troops, turning her into an accidental bomb waiting to ignite. Her commander, Rear Admiral Oskar Kummetz, believed strict adherence to the plan was essential and assumed the Norwegians would not fire upon an unidentified vessel in darkness. Facing this imposing machine was the fated, seemingly obsolete Oscarsborg Fortress, located at the narrowest point of the Oslofjord. Its main battery consisted of 3 28-centimeter guns manufactured in 1892 to 1893, each capable of firing only one round every 2 to 3 minutes. The fortress was undermanned and populated largely by raw recruits who had arrived just a week earlier. Mines meant to protect the channel had not been laid, as the recruits lacked the training to deploy them. The situation was further complicated by unclear political orders. Norway was neutral, and the fortress commander, Colonel Birger Eriksen, had received no explicit instructions on whether to fire upon unknown vessels. The hidden advantage of Oscarsborg lay beneath the surface. Built into a cavern on North Caholmen Island was a torpedo battery containing 3 ancient Whitehead torpedoes produced around 1900. This system, considered archaic by 1940 standards, was not included in German intelligence assessments. Its commander on April 9th was Kommandeur Captain Andreas Andersen, a recalled retiree who had once trained on the very machinery now under his control. The German fleet's first encounter with Norwegian resistance came when the patrol boat Paul III challenged the intruders. After refusing to surrender, the small vessel was fired upon and rammed by the German torpedo boat Albatross. Its captain, Leif Velding Olsen, wounded in the freezing water, urged his crew to save themselves before succumbing to his injuries. With the outer defenses compromised and the fjord cloaked in fog, Kummetz advanced confidently toward Oslo. At Oscarsborg, Colonel Eriksen prepared for the worst. Despite reports of unidentified vessels forcing the outer lines, he had limited personnel to man the guns. Only 2 of the 328-centimeter guns could be operated. Eriksen made a critical decision. He would fire live ammunition without issuing warning shots. A warning shot, he reasoned, would allow the modern German guns to locate and obliterate his exposed batteries before a second round could be loaded. The moment Blücher appeared, an enormous dark silhouette only 1.6 to 1.8 kilometers away, Eriksen uttered his famous words, "Fist Fantenskelder skads me skapt, enten blir jeg stilt for krigsret, eller så blir jeg krigshelt. Fyr!" The first shell struck near the Blücher's bridge, destroying the central fire control system and igniting fuel stored on deck. The second shot hit the aircraft hangar and surrounding ammunition stocks, triggering catastrophic fires. German anti-aircraft guns sprayed the shoreline wildly but could not silence the entrenched Norwegian guns. Within minutes, the cruiser was engulfed in flames. As she drifted out of the main battery's arc, she entered the line of fire of the hidden torpedo battery. Anderson waited until the ship was only 500 meters away before firing 2 torpedoes. The first struck the boiler room, the second the turbine room. Blücher lost power, began flooding uncontrollably, and soon listed heavily to port. Witnessing the destruction of their flagship, the commanders of the following cruisers Lützow and Emden believed they had entered a minefield. They reversed course and retreated, abandoning their timetable. Blücher burned for nearly 2 hours before capsizing and sinking at 6:22. Between 800 and 1,000 German personnel, sailors, and troops were killed, many trapped beneath burning oil or succumbing to the freezing water. The loss included key administrative officials meant to orchestrate the political takeover of Norway. Later that day, the Luftwaffe bombed Oscarsborg heavily, forcing the eventual surrender of the fortress, though only after Eriksen confirmed that his mission, to delay the enemy long enough for the government to escape, had been achieved. The time bought by the sinking of Blücher proved decisive. King Haakon VII, the royal family, and the government evacuated Oslo by train less than an hour after the cruiser sank. Had Blücher reached Oslo as planned, German troops would have seized the capital before the king even rose for breakfast. The escape allowed the king to refuse German demands that he appoint the Nazi sympathizer Vidkun Quisling as prime minister. Haakon declared he would rather abdicate than legitimize a puppet regime. His refusal inspired the government to reject surrender, ensuring that Norway would continue to fight alongside the Allies. That same window also allowed the evacuation of Norway's national gold reserves, around 50 tons, which were transported through Luftwaffe harried routes to British warships and eventually to safety abroad. This gold funded the Norwegian government in exile and the operation of the Norwegian merchant fleet, which became a vital asset in the Allied war effort. Blücher's destruction highlights the recurrent vulnerability of modern warships to critical node hits and the danger of overconfidence. Her advanced systems were made ineffective by the loss of fire control, while the decision to store fuel and munitions on deck turned her into a tinderbox. German intelligence underestimated both the resolve of Oscarsborg's commander and the continued functionality of its outdated defenses. Most crucial was Eriksen's choice to fire without hesitation, a decision that shifted the course of the invasion. In retrospect, if Eriksen had followed protocol and fired a warning shot, Blücher almost certainly would have survived the passage. She would have arrived in Oslo at dawn, captured the king and government, and installed Quisling as a puppet prime minister under German supervision. The Norwegian merchant fleet, consisting of over 1,000 modern ships, might have been forced into German service or confined to neutral ports. Instead, the destruction of Blücher ensured Norway's continued resistance and preserved a legitimate government in exile that contributed significantly to the Allied cause. The sinking of the Blücher remains the pivotal moment of the Norwegian campaign, demonstrating that in war the decisive factor is often not technology or numbers, but the resolve and judgment of individuals placed at critical junctures. Oscarsborg's pensioners, recruits, and outdated weapons bought the hours that reshaped Norway's destiny and in turn influenced the wider war.